Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality? Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited for you to meet my friend Lauren Lucas. Lauren is a country artist and singer-songwriter. She's had her songs placed in multiple movies over the years, and she's been a part of the female country pop group Farewell Angelina, which is where I originally met her because I do some booking for the group Farewell Angelina, and Lauren was a member of that group when I first met her. And since then, she has gone back out as a solo artist again and is having great success with that as an independent recording artist. She's been signed to different labels, and she's worked independently. And so I'm excited for you to hear her story of how she's worked her way through and navigated the waters of the music industry as a recording artist who's been signed and independently as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation today. All right, hey everybody, we're hanging out with my friend Lauren Lucas. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm great. Really happy to be here.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
You and I met about, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So I do booking, among many other things. One of the things I do is booking for artists, and I do booking for a country female quartet called Farewell Angelina. And when I met you, you were a part of that group.
That's
at
right.
the time. You had just come on.
Yeah.
I just joined the group, I think. And I met you over at the factory here in Franklin at a show that you guys were playing, Music City Pickers Live, with Brady Seals and Gordon Kennedy. And Gordon was actually just on, has been on the podcast, so that's been fun. But I met you there and got to know you a little bit and was excited to, jump in working with you guys in that capacity. And I've been able to book a couple of shows for you when you were with the group, and then I know now you're out doing solo career.
Right, yeah.
And so we'll kind of get into some of that a little bit more later, but I just want people to know who you are and how we met to begin with. So you're an artist, and you're a songwriter, and very successful at what you've been able to do over your lifetime.
Well, thank you.
I think
that
you
might
are.
Be to the, in the eye of the beholder, but
well,
thank you.
I think you've been very successful in what you've been able to do. And we talk about that a lot. Success is different for everybody.
For sure.
It's never the same for two people necessarily.
Yeah.
But give our audience just a brief history of who you are and how you got into music and what's kind of led you down the path to what you're doing now.
Sure. So, I was born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And when I was 3, my older sister, Becky, decided she wanted to audition for a musical theater production, Town Theater, which is, I think, the longest running community theater in America.
Oh, wow.
Still running.
Okay.
In downtown Columbia. And I went to the audition and I saw a bunch of other kids and adults. It was an all ages kind of music review, if you will, called Showstoppers. And I saw all these other people auditioning and it looked like fun. And I asked my mom if I could audition. I don't remember any of this. This is just like the family story that's seeped in now to my psyche. But my mom let me audition and I jumped up on stage and I recited the poem, There Was a Little Girl Who Had a Little Curl Right in the Middle of Her Forehead, the Mother Goose rhyme.
Yep.
And I got in the show with my sister. And so at 3 years old, they would put sheet music in front of me and kind of treat me just like everybody else, even though I was the youngest in the cast and, of course, could not read sheet music yet. And It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want To is the big number that I was a part of. And I got a huge musical education from doing this musical review. It ended up being something I did every summer, and the show would change every summer. But they did songs from the 1940s to what was then the 80s. They'd do patriotic numbers and 50s and 60s music and cowboy music and jazz and pop. And I mean, it just really ran the gamut. And so I learned a ton of different styles and just fell in love with being on the stage.
Yeah. This is just singing at this point.
Well, there was movement, if you will, as well.
But you weren't playing an instrument at that time?
No,
okay.
No. And so that was really how I started, or just kind of knew that I guess had a bit of a natural propensity for singing, that I could sing and had pitch, and then just really had a love for music and for performing. And then when I was 6, I started piano lessons, and I think I probably really wanted to start lessons, but I hated practicing. And so that was a struggle. And so I took for a couple years, and then I think I quit for a little bit, if memory serves, and then I picked it up again like around age 9. And then at 12, I started guitar lessons. Okay. And my memory of that was that my dad bought a guitar for himself, and he wanted to learn how to play guitar, and then he got frustrated and pawned it off on me and said, well, Lauren always wanted to play, which I don't know if that was really true, but that's how I remember it going down. Yeah. And so anyway, I ended up taking piano and guitar. And then eventually I took drum lessons as well, which was just something fun. And I don't know, I just wanted to do that. So I also played flute in the middle school band. So yeah, very, very musical as a kid.
Well, I think that's really good for the audience to hear, because it's important to know an instrument, at least one. But the fact that you took the time, especially like in high school and middle school in that time frame, to learn multiple instruments, not a lot of people do that. And I think that's really smart to do. You're creating opportunities for yourself when you know multiple instruments to begin with. That's what you call a utility player in the music business.
Yeah.
You know, when you can play multiple instruments for an artist, you know, and that just gives you more opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't on purpose at that point.
Right, but
still. But you're right. I mean, and now that you say that, I mean, I played guitar for myself, by myself, on my radio tour with Warner Brothers.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have gotten the spot in Farewell Angelina had I not been able to play guitar as well as I do, which is not, I'm not the greatest in the world, but I've got a pretty steady, rhythm. And, I mean, that was a huge help. And then, I have a stone cold country cover band called the Honky Tonk Angels that we've off and on played over the last 8 years or so. And then we revolve instruments. And so we each play something different. So I kind of picked up bass. I'm really horrible on bass, but I love to try. And so we all just kind of, revolved instruments. But even that, like, I don't think we would have even had the idea to put something like that together had we not all been multi-instrumentalists.
Exactly.
So you're right. It was a good foundation, and I didn't even know what I was doing, but it was very helpful.
Yeah. I think that's encouraging for people to know that you did that, and to tell people you should do that. You should know multiple things. It's just going to open up other opportunities for you long-term down the road.
Well, for sure. And, being a podcast on how to make a living in this business, it also saves money when you don't have to hire a musician, and, when you can do it yourself. Not that you should, I'm not necessarily saying you should do everything yourself. You can't be an island in this business either, but sometimes it's helpful.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I cut you off there.
Oh,
so
that's all right.
Keep going. You're playing multiple instruments and...
Yes, all the while doing community theater, all the while now taking dance lessons, and just really an artsy kid. And also listening, like, I loved Judy Garland and Bernadette Peters and was a total jazz hands theater geek. But then also listened to country radio with my grandmother, who was a very instrumental person in my life and helped raise me to a certain extent. And she always had country radio on in the car. And so anytime I was with Grandma, which was often, I would be listening to Alabama and Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers and Oak Ridge Boys and you name it. Yeah. So got a good country music education as well. And then right around the time I was starting to play guitar is when the big 90s country boom happened. Garth Brooks happened and Shania Twain happened and all the things. And so a few years later, still as a teenager, I started playing with some bands around town, just other guys who were in high school, just like I was at that point. None of them went to my high school, but I just started just through, I think probably my guitar teacher, and young people would just come through the guitar studio taking lessons, and we would just meet.
Right.
And so I started playing in some cover bands. My dad learned how to do some sound engineering so that he could chaperone me into some bars and clubs. And so I was playing in bars and festivals, even in high school, doing, country cover gigs. Mm-hmm. And then that led me to ultimately meeting someone in Nashville.
So how did you, so you're in high school and you're playing these types of venues, and granted your dad's going with you, but who is booking you to get into these venues?
Oh, that's a good question. And I don't know if I can remember anymore, or if,
somebody's doing it for you. You're obviously not booking yourself to get into a bar.
No, I was not like beating on doors like I was as an adult, so somebody was, either maybe my mom and dad were helping, or I think some of the other guys in the band, because, there were several different bands I was in, and the first band, I was not like the ringleader. It was not my band by any means, and so they would get gigs and be like, hey, we got a gig, can you play? And I would show up. So that was kind of, they were doing it all. And there was a restaurant called Goodfellas in Chapin, South Carolina. I don't know if it's still there, but we played there a ton. And so, we'd just find a spot or two, and that would be our home, Yeah. And then, Farther South was a band I was in for quite a while in high school. And the drummer and the bass player were cousins. And the drummer's dad and uncles had already been playing around South Carolina. And so they had a ton of connections. So I think somehow probably through the drummer, and we just all kind of pitched in. So it's very murky at this point.
Sure.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. So, but you're building a name for yourself in your area, in your region.
Yeah.
Kind of locally and regionally. It's not, you're not out touring all over the country right now, but you're building a fan base, which is really good.
Sure. Yeah.
Really smart. Yeah. Especially at that age to be able to do that, just in high school. Most people are out playing sports or video games or whatever, mm-hmm. and you're out, building a career. The foundations of a career.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I was not thinking of it that strategically, but yes.
But I want people that are listening now, because people that are wanting to get into this industry, mm-hmm. Especially somebody that's in high school or early college, mm-hmm. that might be listening, or even, it doesn't matter, even adults that are thinking, you know what, I can still do this. There's, there is no age limit. We kind of put this fake facade of, if you're not doing this by your late teens, early 20s, you can't be successful doing this. Right. And that's not true. Mm-hmm. Ultimately that's not true. But, you're doing something that's creating the foundations of a business for you and of a career. And so the people that are listening right now, even though you weren't thinking about it at that time, mm-hmm. for those that are listening that are thinking, I would like to do this, that's good information for them to know. I need to start working on this now. Mm-hmm. I need to start mm-hmm. building that foundation and getting out and playing some shows, and even just where I live. Yeah. So.
That's right. And really, you're right. The process is the same no matter how old you are. Yeah. If you're a teenager and have a parent who can get you into clubs, or if you're 40 and just starting out, building the foundation, it's the same.
Right. Exactly.
It's the same stuff you got to do. Sure. So anyway, I was also doing some pageants and festivals and some solo, singing to karaoke tapes too. Mm-hmm. I was doing some of that on my own. And someone in the community knew somebody in Nashville and introduced my parents to them, and they flew down to see me and with Farther South and playing with the band, and then flew me back up to Nashville with my parents and had me kind of audition, if you will, in a way, for Donna Hilley, who was heading Sony ATV Tree, it was then called, publishing.
Okay. So the person that was from Nashville flew down to check you out,
yes.
liked what they heard.
Yes, and the person, I should say, is Pat McMakin.
Okay.
And I worked with Pat. He produced the stuff that ultimately ended up being demos once I got signed to Sony ATV Tree. They ended up signing me to a publishing and production deal. But we reconnected. I mean, we've been friends all these years, but we decided to actually make music together again for the first time in almost 20 years with my the single that I put out this past summer called Go Home Paul.
Okay.
So he produced that. So it was a nice little reunion, full circle moment. So Pat came down, saw me, and then he actually flew another producer down, Chris Waters, who is no longer in Nashville, but the two of them co-produced some demos or sides on me, and then pitched it to Donna Hilly. And Donna said, yes, I like this girl. And Leanne Rimes had just hit big. And so most of the labels and publishing houses in town were looking for their teenager for their roster.
So you're still a teenager at this point?
Yeah, I'm like 14 or 15.
And you're getting a publishing deal at that age?
I did.
So were you writing your own songs at that time, obviously?
Not yet. Not yet. When they signed me, they said, we're going to teach you how to write songs, and we're going to pitch you to labels, and you already sing, and you know, we're going to record what you write and pitch you to labels.
Okay, so I want to stop there for a second, because that's interesting that a publisher signs you to a publishing deal and you've never written a song before. That doesn't seem normal.
And probably infuriating to people listening who have been working their tails off trying to write amazing songs. And I would not blame them for feeling that way. But also, you have to realize this was 96, 95, I don't know what it was, 96 maybe? And everything people touched in this town turned into money.
Right.
It was the boom.
Yeah, it was.
And it was a shtick. I was a teenager, and Leanne Rimes was I mean, it was about the marketing. It was not...
They're riding the coattails of what was already hot.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was circumstantial for me.
Okay.
Now, that's not... I mean...
You're still
I brought
you're
something to the table,
sure.
but there was a lot that was circumstantial for me at that point.
Okay.
And total, talent meeting a ton of luck.
Right.
A ton of luck and timing.
Well, one of the things I talk about all the time is that this is a relationship-based business. Mm-hmm. So your parents knew somebody, correct?
Well, I mean...
Who was it that knew Pat here in town?
It was a talent agent, like a really small town talent agent in South Carolina, knew just a friend. And Pat ended up at some point having worked with this friend's band in the past. So it was like a very somebody knew somebody knew somebody.
Right. But there's a connection there.
That's right.
At some point, and then he comes down and checks you out, likes what he sees and hears.
That's right.
And you guys build a relationship.
Yep.
And then that leads to other things that allows you to get a publishing deal. So
that's right. Yep. Publishing and production. It was all wrapped into one.
But it's all relationship based.
Yes.
When it comes down to it. And,
for sure.
Okay, so you get signed to this publishing deal or artist development deal.
That's right. Yeah.
And and continue on from there, because this is fascinating hearing hearing how this is working out for you.
Well, so they pitched me to RCA, and RCA, another full circle moment. I'll explain this later on. I'm sure we'll get there. But one of the A&R reps that was at RCA at the time was named Tom Schuyler, who is a hit songwriter for Kenny Rogers and lots of great songs. So Tom and several other executives had this big meeting, and I sang live around the boardroom table, and Chris and Pat are there, and we're doing the dog and pony show ultimately. And they decided they liked me enough to sign me to what they call a development deal.
Okay.
So they're willing to let go of some money for Pat and Chris to take me in the studio, I think we did 3 songs as kind of the ultimate demo.
Right.
like we're going to give you some money. You're going to go in and find the best songs you can, produce them the best that you can, and then bring them back to us. And then we'll decide if we're going to upgrade them to masters and sign you to a full-blown record deal.
Okay.
So that's what RCA did. Okay. Around the same time, I still had one foot, I guess, in musical theater, and caught wind of an audition for an off-Broadway show called Take the Show and Shove It. And they were, it was an original musical, and they were going to workshop it in Houston, Texas, before they took it to New York. And I sent out a video audition in, they gave me a call back, and I ended up getting cast as the teenager. One of the lead roles was a teenage daughter, and I got cast as that role. And so I finished the sides for RCA. I'm in high school, still in South Carolina, and I moved to Houston for about 3 months to do this Take the Show and Shove It off-Broadway show.
Okay.
And so by the time I got back from Houston, RCA had decided there was another young female that they had apparently done the same thing to.
A development deal with
That's
as
right.
well? Okay.
And they had decided to give the money and upgrade the masters for this other artist.
Okay.
So I did not get the full-blown record deal with RCA. I come back from Houston, I finish high school, and then ultimately graduate, I guess, the following year. And I'd already learned about Belmont University because I'd been coming back and forth to Nashville for several years now because of this development deal, and decided to go to Belmont for college.
Okay.
And so did that. While I'm in college, the director from the off-Broadway show, Take the Show and Shove It from Houston, has teamed up with the screenwriter for Urban Cowboy, and they've decided to make a Broadway adaptation of that musical. And they've asked me if I would come up to New York and do the workshop reading of Urban Cowboy as the role of Sissy, the Deborah Winger role. And so I went up to New York when I was in college and did that. And then they got the funding to actually take it to Broadway. And when they were looking for songs for their original score, I wrote a song that fit into the show.
Oh, wow.
And ended up getting a song in a Broadway show.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
How random.
Totally random. And also totally cool because it was like my musical theater and my country music worlds collided in the most perfect way.
Right. So when you had the development deal in high school with RCA, and you signed with Sony ATV.
That was like the publisher.
The publishing aspect
house,
of it.
Yes.
Right. So when you signed with them, because you said you weren't a writer at that point, they were going to teach you how to write.
That's right.
So were the songs that you put out for your demos, were those songs that you ended up writing or co-writing?
Let me try to remember. Definitely not all of them.
Okay.
And maybe even none of them.
Okay. But they were teaching you, like, how much time did you spend learning how to write songs with these guys?
Yeah. So I mean, I can't remember how steadily I was coming back to Nashville, but it was, a fair amount. Every couple of months I was coming up to Nashville from South Carolina, and they would always have co-writes scheduled for me.
Okay.
And so one of the first co-writes I ever had was with Vicki McGehee, who's gone on to write huge hits for Gretchen Wilson and Faith Hill and a lot of others. But at the time, she was a fairly new writer and just probably in her first writing deal, you know? And so anyway, they would put me in rooms with these pro writers who were getting paid to write songs at their publishing company. And I was doing that a good bit. I just wasn't seasoned and good enough yet to really record those songs. Right. And honestly, like, teaching me how to write is kind of mostly they just stuck me in a room with some adults, and the adults would ask me a little bit about my life, which, I don't know, I was such a suburban, just kind of, I just hadn't lived any hardships yet, like I had a really fortunate childhood and, pretty good life, and it just really didn't have a ton to pull from. Yeah. And so I'm sure, it was
But they're teaching you structure, like how to write a song, like the structure of a song and those types of things. So I teach songwriting with some of my students as well. So I teach guitar and different things, but I also teach songwriting. So a lot of that is just teaching structure and, verse, chorus, bridge, like the layout of a song and rhyme scheme and AABB sections and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. So you're probably learning that kind of stuff at that point in life. So the reason I'm asking that is because you went from not knowing how to write songs when you got signed to a deal to you write a song that ends up in a Broadway play, right?
Well, so 5, 6, 7 years later.
Well, yeah, but still, so. Is that your first major placement for a song?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, I know. Kind of crazy.
That's cool.
And it just all kind of seeped in. Like, no one was really sitting me down, even in those writer rooms, going like, this is a structure and this is a chorus, and to some extent that would have been helpful, and even more just how to draw truly from inspiration or even when you art inspired, how you still find lyric, like there were some lessons that it took me, I feel like, forever to learn, because mostly I was just kind of sitting in a room feeling super uncomfortable watching these people write a song. Yeah. Which, again, probably sounds infuriating to some people listening.
That's their dream, is to sit in a room with these people.
Yeah, well, I know, but that's what
It's
just
what it
what it
was.
was.
But
That's
man,
how it
what a
happened
great
for me.
opportunity for you.
Well, for sure. And eventually, rest assured, I work really hard at it now.
Oh, of course you do.
and I learned much, eventually. I think it did take forever. It felt like forever, but I finally learned how to write on my own and write by myself, and then also co-write and lead co-writes and all that. So,
well, let's
anyway.
jump forward a little bit, because
Sure.
after you land that song in a New York Broadway play, eventually you come back to Nashville. Mm-hmm. And then what's the process of you moving forward with your songwriting career and artist career after being up in New York working on Broadway?
Yeah. So, and when I was in New York, those were little blips. I didn't move up there. I mean, those were like visits,
Okay.
like long little visits. And so meanwhile, I'm in Nashville in college going to school, and I graduate with a music degree. And one of my professors had introduced me the summer before my senior year at Belmont. She wrote me an email and she said, "Hey, there's a producer in town, great guy named Biff Watson, who's looking to produce some acts. And I think y'all might really hit it off. You should meet with him." And so she introduced me to Biff. And Biff ended up working with me, putting me with different co-writers. And so at this point, I was truly contributing in the writing room, and I was writing at this point.
Yeah.
So he worked with me for several months, just putting me with different co-writers. I was writing new material. He had a studio at his home, and we'd go in and do just kind of some guitar vocals and kind of glorified work tape kind of stuff. And then he pitched some of that to Paul Worley, who at the time was at Warner Brothers Records. Mm-hmm. And Paul invited us in for a meeting, and we did the boardroom showcase, sang a few songs. I think I played guitar for myself even then. Mm-hmm. I'm like 20, 21, 22, something like that. And got my full-blown record deal this time.
Okay.
So got the record deal, and then started the process of, well, really you just kind of continue to write and you continue to work until you feel like you've got a stable of songs that are stellar. And then we went in and recorded a full record.
Okay.
And then what happened was they released a single. They sent me out on a big fancy radio tour where it was me on a bus with a bus driver and a radio promotion rep from Warner Brothers. And again, play guitar for myself. So that's where the education from
exactly.
12 years old helped. And not always, for sure. Like sometimes I'd take a band out and some other instrumentalists would play with me. But oftentimes I was playing by myself, and did the whole radio tour, had some really amazing experiences opening for Rascal Flatts and Blake Shelton and Lone Star and some really cool shows. And then...
Now, let me ask you, let's stop just real quick. When you're getting to open up for these artists, who is putting you in those positions to open up for those guys?
Right. Okay, so once you get a record deal,
Mm-hmm.
it happens differently for different people,
Sure.
and sometimes people don't rush these steps, and sometimes people do rush the steps. But all of a sudden, more doors are open to you, and more people are interested in being a part of your team. And so at that point, I had William Morris was my booking agency.
Okay.
And so William Morris was helping. Also, when you're with a label, sometimes, like Blake Shelton was a label mate of mine.
Right.
And so Blake was actually opening for Rascal Flatts, and so then I got put on as the second opener, if
Okay.
you will, opening for Blake.
Right.
And so sometimes it's not even a booking agency thing, it's a label thing, and it's hey, this is advantageous to put all this together, right? So and I had a manager at the time, and so there were a lot of people working on my behalf,
So
behind the scenes.
I'm just trying to get information out so that the listeners kind of know how the process works. And like you said, it's different for everybody, but for you, so you get to start working with a producer, and you get signed to a label deal. Well, once you get signed, then all of a sudden, then they're going to hook you up with a publisher, and then a booking agent and a promoter, and so you get to build this team around what you're already doing. That's going to put you out on these tours and radio tours and things like that.
That's right. So doors open up because everybody it's like, oh, well, if you're on a major label, then that means they're hopefully going to put money and resources behind you, and they're going to believe in you. And then, if you actually work and you actually make it and hit with something, then there's a lot of money to be earned. And so, you're lessening the risk for yourself when you can align with a company like that, or at least back at, we're talking 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
I think the role of the label has changed in a lot of ways today, but back then it was still very label driven.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually decided not to go with a publishing company. At that point, so my deal with Sony ATV Tree at the time, I think it's called now Sony Tree.
Sony ATV.
Or is it Sony ATV?
Yes,
okay, I was like, which one did they drop? Yeah, Sony ATV. So that deal had ended actually right as I was going into college. So I didn't have a publishing deal through college. But then once I got the deal memo from the label, from Warner Brothers, that they wanted to sign me, I started going back to some publishing friends that I had made over the last several years. And frankly, quite foolishly and kind of, is pompously a word?
Yes,
pompously,
sure, it is now.
Sure. Kind of thought, oh, I've got a record deal. Like, this is going to be a piece of cake. I'm going to get a publishing deal, and then I'm going to get paid to write songs again, and I'm going to get this artist draw. And, I just thought this was going to be super easy because I'd heard that's the way it happened.
Right.
Well, at first, everyone was like, hey, congratulations. That's really great. You got this deal. Keep bringing us songs. And that's the line you're going to hear from publishers when you first start meeting publishers. It's like, bring us more stuff, bring us more stuff, bring us more stuff. It's like, how much stuff do you need to hear before you know? And so that was I was just kind of getting strung along and just, hey, bring us more stuff, bring us more stuff. So no one would sign me as far as a publishing deal at that point. Then once I started recording some actual master sides for the label, Paul brought in all the publishing companies after we had like 5 or 6 done. And we did this huge meeting of like, hey, we've have half the record done. Lauren's continuing to write. We've got some options on the table, but we want to hear your best stuff. So here are the 5 or 6 sides we already have. I played live a few songs. They played some recordings of some of the songs. We're looking for 5 or 6 more to complete this record. And so he really, very smartly, garnered the buy-in and the interest from the publishing community. And it was at that point that some of the same publishers that I had gone to earlier who said no or weren't really ready to pull the trigger wanted to sign me to a deal. And at that point I was like, well, wait a second. Some of these were the same songs. I'm certainly the same girl that just came to you 6 months ago. Now you found out that I have co-written some of the songs that are actually going to be on my record. And now you want to take the publishing and you want to sign me to a deal for further songs. And I just kind of had a chip on my shoulder about it. I just thought, you didn't believe in me 6 months ago. Now you believe in me?
Sure.
But I will say I learned a lesson, which is I jumped the gun. I was such a go-getter. And also just so naive, like I'm still like 21 years old, like I'm young, I put cart before the horse and just kind of took some steps on my own without realizing what a benefit it is to just hang on a second. Let's get some sides together. Let's get some evidence that this is really happening and that this is really sounding good and that the label's really behind me and supporting me and I've got Paul's support and I've got Biff's support. Let's really show the community what's going on here as a full package.
Okay.
And I just kind of ran ahead of it. And then when I actually got an offer for what I wanted 6 months earlier, the publishing deal, I turned it down because I had a chip on my shoulder. And then what happened is ultimately when I lost my deal, then I was an island. I didn't have a team around me. I didn't have a thing to fall back on. Songwriting, draw financially as a songwriter to continue to write songs for other artists or myself, but also a team of people at a publishing house to go, hey, it's okay. We're going to pitch you to another label or we're going to help, we're going to help you get back on your feet. And that's what publishing companies oftentimes do. And I just, I really kind of shot myself in the foot in that way. I feel like now looking back.
Once you go through something like that, I've never been signed to a label. I've done everything myself. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it's like to lose a record deal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's not fun.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not fun. Were you able to ever get an album out before the deal was over with?
So no, ultimately is the answer.
Okay.
So what happened
Which
was...
is a normal thing. It's a common thing.
Totally.
People think like that's probably I don't know if people think that's a weird thing or not, but that's more common than not.
Oh, and also, there are so many artists who are signed to major label deals that you've never heard of. They come and they go on and off the rosters so quickly or so quietly that it would probably blow people's mind to really know how many people get, not like everyone's getting a record deal, but I mean, there are so many more artists who are getting record deals than people ever even realize, because they just don't even get the light of day.
Wow.
For such a variety of reasons.
Sure.
In my case, what happened was, okay, we finished the record. They have paid for a record. Like, we had a huge major label budget to go in. We recorded at Blackbird Studios, which is like creme de la creme. There was a lot of money that went into this thing. And besides time and energy and talent and hopes and dreams and all the things, right? And so we record this whole album. We do the photo shoot. We've got all the things ready to go. They've got me on radio tour. I'm opening for some major acts. I'm going all over the country visiting radio stations. And they have put out a single, What You Ain't Gonna Get, which is a song I did not write. Marcus Hummin and Tom Shapiro wrote it. And things are going well. I'm playing the Opry. I'm on the ACM Awards. Like, I mean, really cool things are starting to happen. Like, it's fun.
Yeah. Well, let's pause for just a moment before
I drop the hammer.
Before you drop the hammer and set in the fact that all of these things that you just listed that you got to do, like, these are dreams of yours. These are dreams of mine. These are dreams of people that are listening that want to be an artist or a songwriter. Like, you're getting to live your dream. As short-lived as that might be, quote unquote, for a time being. But you're getting to go out and tour and open up for these huge country acts, and you're getting to be on the Grand Ole Opry and the ACM award shows, and like you're living it. You're getting to do it. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You know, and then now the hammer falls.
Yeah. Okay. And then sad trombone sound. Then my manager gets a call from the label that basically saying, I was at Fido, I'll never forget, Fido Coffee Shop, saying, hey, we pulled the single and we asked radio to flip the song to a song that I had co-written with Dave Berg and Deanna Bryant called The Carolina Kind. And that was going to be the name of the record because I'm from South Carolina and this was the big song, you know. And so we've asked all the radio stations in the country to flip the single and go with this other song, The Carolina Kind, instead. They didn't ask us. There was no strategy. There was no nothing. It was just like unilaterally we did this thing.
This is the label wanting to do this?
Yeah. And what had happened right before that, I should back up, is Paul, who was at the time kind of over the entire Nashville branch of the label. He was running the label at the time. I think, if I remember correctly, I think we always kind of knew that was just kind of an interim position. And they were looking for someone to come in and run the label.
Okay.
And so that had happened right before I went out on radio tour. And so Paul, who had been my support system, the guy that signed me to the deal, his thumbprint was on the project, he was put as head of A&R, which was the creative stuff. And then someone else was brought in from LA to actually run the label. Well, what happens, I assume every time a regime change like that happens, is the new person that comes in to run the label, they have their own wish list of artists they want to sign, people they want to work with, songs they love, vision for the label. I mean, they've got they're now running the show. They've got their whole vision. And I did not fit in that vision, you know, and I don't know if it's just because the phrase that was used to us was train had already left the station and I didn't feel a part of it. And it's like, well, that was just an unfortunate timing thing. Yeah. Like, we had set all this up before you'd even gotten the job, you know? But that was what was said, and maybe they really felt that way, you know? And now think about how many people, you know, who have been in that same position, again, artists you've never heard of, who that's why you've never heard of them, is because there was a regime change and the train had left the station and they didn't feel a part of it.
Right.
Like, it's sad and frustrating.
Yeah.
And At the time, another artist that many, many people know was a label mate of mine who got caught up in a very similar timing as Joanna Cotton, who now, is making a huge name for herself singing with Eric Church on the road, and is amazing in her own right as well. And there were a lot of us. I mean, there was a whole stable of artists who ended up ultimately leaving the label.
Okay.
But it didn't happen that quickly. It was like, hey, train left the station. I don't feel a part of this. And when they flipped the single, by the way, that showed every radio station in the country that we were waffling. We didn't have strategy. All of a sudden, this label isn't really behind this girl. And so it just killed it just killed any momentum of any single at that point. But it wasn't like, and see you later. It was like, no, we're going to keep you on the roster and we're going to bring in some new A&R people. You're going to work with them. We're going to try to find some new songs for you and see if maybe you can appeal to me a little bit more. It was almost like a re-auditioning process for this new guy. Wow. But not letting you free to explore other opportunities or make music
because you're signed
freely.
to a contract.
That's right.
Yeah.
And also holding all this music hostage that is now on this record that's been packaged and photo shooted, and I know that's not a word, but you know what I mean.
Photoshot.
Yes. So anyway, it's like this weird hostagey situation, with your art and your life.
Yeah, I think that's something that listeners need to take into account. If you're an artist and you're wanting to get signed to a label deal, the reality is you may get the deal and you may be successful and it may take off and you may be the next Keith Urban or Miranda Lambert or whoever.
Yeah.
But you may end up sitting on a shelf somewhere in the dark gathering dust because something like you said, a regime change, different people come in, have a different vision, different agenda, and you end up just kind of sitting there held hostage and they don't want to let you out of a deal.
Right.
And you're just kind of stuck there.
Right.
And it happens a lot.
It does. And for some artists that we know, their household names, it's happened to them before they found the right home.
Right.
And then it worked,
and it did work. Yeah.
So again, everybody's story is different.
Yeah. And I want to say it to give hope to people. That's not to like scare people into thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this because that's going to happen to me. It may and it may not, but you never know. If you don't try, you'll never find out.
That's right.
So if you got the opportunity to give it a shot, you got to take that into account. But,
that's right.
If there's an opportunity there, look at all the options and do the best thing that's best for your career.
That's right. And also, at the time, that the one song in a Broadway play wasn't enough leverage for me to dictate how my contract was going to go with the label. It's like the other thing you kind of have to realize is when you're the new kid with not a huge track record of success, public success, you don't have a lot of leverage negotiating your contract. The label does.
Right.
So you're pretty much at the mercy of whatever the contract is that they give you. Now, another route that some people do go is they write, and they concentrate solely on their songwriting, and they get some huge hits with some other artists, and then they get a record deal on their own.
Right.
And then they might have some more leverage to have a little bit more freedom in their contract. But I didn't have that.
Yeah.
It just wasn't how that worked out for me.
Yeah. So when you transitioned, I mean, you're still an artist now, I know that, but you started writing for other people, didn't you?
Yeah. So I stayed on the label for a while. I think they even took me in, if I remember correctly, and we did cut new sides. And it still it couldn't get the new guy on board. I had asked Paul if I should leave the label, like I was ready to go, because I was, again, kind of being held hostage there. And he said, no, let's keep working on it. Let's try.
Okay.
And I stayed even a little longer, and then finally they let me go.
Okay.
And then after that, yes, yes and no. I transitioned into songwriting, more so, but first I did make an independent EP called If I Was Your Girl. I'm trying to remember what year that was, maybe 2000. I can't even remember now. Okay. But anyway, 5 or 6, I can't remember. Anyway, I had just left the label, and I wanted to show the community, like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is still what I want to do. Yeah. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I have things to say. And so I put that independent EP out, followed it up in 2011 with a second independent EP. Meanwhile, yes, I had been focusing on songwriting, trying to get another record deal as well. Like, I had taken some meetings. Again, cart before horse. I would cold call like the head of Capitol, and just they let me come in, and I took a meeting all by myself. Like,
well, man,
I mean, it's
that's awesome.
It is,
I
and
mean,
it isn't. Like,
okay.
it's
But the fact that you could get it, the fact that you could do it though, whether you, I mean, I'm assuming you had a relationship with the person that's the head of
one of the A&R people,
Yeah.
but like not the head guy, and I don't know. It was very strange.
Well, I'll give you credit for taking the initiative and having the guts to call up the head person of a major record label and say, "Hey, can I get a meeting with you?" And they say yes. Like, that's guts. And so whether it turns bad or not, the fact that you did it says something about you.
Well, yeah, it says something, that's for sure. Honestly, I look back and go, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really even remember who that person was. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just young, and
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I had gumption. But again, it's cart before horse. Like, I want listeners to kind of realize, like, yes, there is value to taking your destiny into your own hands and working really hard and making bold decisions and taking risks. There is, for sure, there's value in that. There is also value in building a team and building some credibility and just something substantial and appetizing about a whole team of support around an artist before you go and make some of those bold decisions.
Sure.
You know, I mean,
Absolutely.
there's value in both.
Yeah.
Now, had it worked, I'd be like, go for it. But again, I think many times I can look back and go, I just wasn't willing to wait on anybody, and I wasn't willing to let people help me. I just went for it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. That I think has its advantages and disadvantages.
I agree. I agree. I see both sides of what you're saying. Having people around you that can help you, because there are certain things that you need to know as a creative person and as a business person. It's good to know both sides of the world that you're living in. But for the things that you don't know, then having other people that, especially on the business side of things, that can help get things done, that you and your weaknesses maybe, to help sort of fill those things, even those things out.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the reason why I didn't wait, and I think this is common, I don't think I'm alone in this, is it feels like when you're waiting on other people, it feels like it's taking forever.
oh yeah, sure.
But when I look at some of my peers, they have been on labels 5 years or more before getting their big break. But then the big break did come. It's like my expectations were so skewed. I thought it was all supposed to happen right away.
Yeah.
And man, the 6-year plan isn't even necessarily a long plan. That's just what it takes.
That's just getting started.
That's
just
right.
getting your feet off the ground sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm talking 5 or 6 years once you signed the big record deal.
Right.
Like, not all the years leading up to that. Like, it takes that. It takes that amount of time. And that's an arbitrary amount of time. Like, it takes different time for different people. But it takes years. Again, it's building credibility. It's building like, okay, this person's sticking around and the label's really behind them. And now we finally, as a community, feel more comfortable going for, putting our support behind them too. It's more years of writing and more years of developing and more years of touring, and it's frustrating because like I was on tour with Warner Brothers, but didn't have product to sell. I had t-shirts.
Okay.
They made t-shirts and I was selling t-shirts, but no music.
Yeah.
Because
you only had a single.
I had a single on the radio, which
it.
of course was getting played like in the middle of the night because I was brand new and they don't give you good time slots at first.
Yeah.
And no actual CDs to sell because my record hadn't come out yet, and then it just never came out. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a really kind of nuts model sometimes.
Yeah. That's good for people to hear that though.
And it's awesome, so keep doing it.
And it's awesome. We're giving you all the worst case scenario stuff to deal with.
No,
and know that
there are
you
a lot
keep
of
going.
there are a lot of silver linings.
But I talk about this a lot, that the people that are successful in this industry are the ones that, regardless of the barriers that you hit and all the obstacles that you have to go through and the ups and downs and getting dropped and whatever, you never gave up. You keep finding ways around the obstacles that you're dealing with, and you've ended up being successful at it. And for those of us that never give up, we're the ones that end up being successful. And at the end of the day, we're the ones that are going to be around 20, 30, 40 years later on, because we just haven't stopped. It's when you get dropped from a label or you can't get signed to a label and you just think, well, I just can't cut it. So I'm just going to go back home, and give up, and I'm going to go work some other job. And, and that's fine. If it's ultimately not what you're supposed to do, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if your goal in life, as a career is to do music and whatever facet that might be, the ones that are successful are the ones who never stop.
Yeah.
Yes. And you've never stopped.
Well, I stopped for a short time and then came back. But
ultimately.
yes, ultimately.
But I'm just saying, overall, you kept going. And, and that's how we get to where we are now. But so you did start writing for other artists.
That's right.
And so you landed a new publishing deal, I'm assuming, because you're writing for other artists, getting cut with that. And
right.
So who did you land with as a publishing company, and who did you start writing for?
Yeah. So the first company I signed with after my record deal was just a little independent company that an investor type person who wasn't even in Nashville, who just decided he wanted to start a publishing company. And that was pretty short-lived, and there was a small stable of writers, and I don't even know if the company as it was exists, which also happens a lot. I mean, I'm sure you have other episodes with publishers and that kind of stuff. So that's a whole other story. Sure. And then I released the second EP, On With the Show, independent EP. And then I signed with a publisher who had has a huge track record of success in town. The original company was called 1010.
Yep.
Jewel Coburn is the publisher's name. 1010 was dissolving after many, many years. Alan Jackson was, and Keith Urban were huge names who had written for that company.
And Mark Irwin.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, Mark Irwin.
Yeah,
that's
Mark's
right.
been on the podcast.
He was your first episode or second?
He was second episode.
Okay, yeah. And so, so she spun off a new company called 1111.
Okay.
Because what's better than 1010?
1111.
1111.
That makes sense.
And so I wrote for Jewel, and Jason Morris was the partner in that company, and wrote for them for a couple years. And it was awesome. I mean, I, again, got some really great opportunities. I got to go to Sundance Film Festival. They took me to Sundance, which was really cool. And, pitching for TV and film opportunities, and really love some of the songs in that catalog. And in fact, a lot of the songs that are in that catalog are the songs that I'm pulling from now to record some of the music that I'm doing. I'm writing new music as well,
right.
But I feel like another thing is that, especially I think when you're writing for publishing companies, the goal's a bit, unless you are signed as a writer specifically as an artist writer, where their intent is to help you get a record deal or to help you have an artist career of some sort. The other option is you're signed as solely as a writer, and then they want you writing what's hip and cool and hopefully going to get cut for another artist.
Right.
And so you end up writing so much content. I mean, you might write 100 songs that year or more. And I mean, there's just so much content. And then those songs, ultimately, most of them, because there's only a couple slots, even if you get really huge cuts, there's just not a lot of room for cuts. And so, I mean, so many of them just end up in the drawer. Yeah. And no one ever hears them. And there are some songs, particularly out of that catalog, that they always stick with me every time I'm invited to play like around at the Bluebird or something like that. These are the songs I always go back to and I never get sick of. And so these are some of the ones like Go Home Paul that I released this summer that I'm recording now for my artist career going forward.
So who are some artists that have cut your songs that we would know? Yeah.
So Danielle Peck.
Yeah.
She was on Big Machine when it first started and has had some success as a solo artist. She cut a song of mine called Kiss Me Like You Miss Me that ended up getting placed in a Shark Tank episode on ABC.
Really?
Yeah, which was really, really fun.
Yeah.
She was asked to be the spokesmodel for one of the startup companies that started from Shark Tank.
Okay.
And so they brought her in as like where are they now for the company? It was... I'm not going to remember the name of the brand, but it was like a chapstick company.
Okay.
And so she recorded the song Kiss Me Like You Miss Me as like their theme song for the chapstick company. And so anyway, there was this like huge little segment in that Shark Tank episode. So that was really fun. Of course, the Urban Cowboy Broadway show. There's a movie that Dakota Johnson and Mira Sorvino starred in called Chloe and Theo.
Okay.
And my friend Damian Horn and I wrote a song years ago called Shine. And he ended up being friends with, I think it was the producer of that film. And so that's how that song got placed into that film. And so it's like the closing credits song.
Nice. So you're landing a lot of TV, a lot of sync placement stuff.
Yeah.
Which is the world that I live in a lot right now. So
I'd like to be doing more of it, frankly.
Well, we'll do it. We'll sit, because I write for TV and film stuff, so let's write together and
let's
we'll
do it.
Do that.
I'd love to.
Okay.
I'd love to. And now I'm not with a publisher. I own my own content and very much on purpose at the moment because I would like to pursue more of that. Yeah. And it's important in that world. Yeah,
in the TV, film, sync world, and commercials and things like that, so for people to know, most of the time, music supervisors and sync licensing agents do not want you to be signed to a publishing company because they want what's called one-stop clearance, which means that if they are interested in licensing your song, they want to be able to clear the song through the writers themselves. And that's straight to us. So we're one stop. Because if I own my own publishing company, which I do, if you and I write together and you are signed to Sony ATV Publishing or whoever else, 1010, 1111, whatever, and somebody wants to license our song to put in a film or a TV show, now they have to go through another avenue to get clearance. They can't just go through you and me. They have to go through your publishing as well. So it's no longer a one-stop clearance scenario. And it's just another hurdle they have to go through. And they run on such a tight schedule, especially in the TV world. Because of that, if they see that there's a publisher they have to go through, or multiple publishers, if maybe 2 or 3 different writers and there's different publishers.
That's right.
And the more people are involved, the less likely they are to license that song. Now, it does happen, and especially when it's like a popular song that's already out and currently kind of hot, whatever, then it does happen. But a lot of times they want it to be a one-stop clearance thing. So if you own your own publishing company, you don't have to deal with that other aspect. So that's why I'm explaining that for listeners to know that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
anyway,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, gosh.
Now, have you landed any songs on albums for other artists besides Danielle?
I have. I'm trying to think, like, what's on my website right now? Because I run that too.
What is your website? So people can go listen to your songs and stuff that you've done. What is your website? Oh,
yeah, thank you. It's laurenlucas.com.
Okay.
So LAURENLUCAS.com.
Okay, and we'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can go check that out and check out your stuff there as well.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, I did get a song in another, I know you asked about albums, but another film called Americanizing Shelley. This was an interesting, I don't know if people find this interesting or not, but I don't remember how I even met this person now, but I had met the producer who ended up also being one of the co-stars of this movie, Americanizing Shelley. She lives in LA. And man, I wish I remembered how I met her, but I don't remember the connection. But at any rate, I talked to her over the phone. She knew I was a writer from Nashville. She needed music for the film. And I lied and said, well, I'm going to be in LA next month. We should get together. And I think she wanted to write because she was part Indian and she wanted part of the song to be in Hindu. And so it was, because the whole movie was about an Indian woman falling in love with an American man, and it was like a funny romantic comedy, lighthearted thing. So anyway, she wanted this special little section of the song, and so anyway, I was like, well, I'm going to be in LA next month. We should, let's find a time. Maybe we can get together and collaborate. And so she's like, okay. And so we set a date and click, and then I'm on Southwest, Southwest flights to LA. So sometimes again, I guess that's where the go-getter mentality is helpful sometimes.
We don't encourage lying on this program, but
Fair
there
enough.
You go.
Fair enough. Got to do what you got to do sometimes. So, and then got in the movie. So, as far as other albums, so Danielle Peck, so even once I left Farewell Angelina, they cut 2 or 3 of my songs for their most current EP.
Oh yeah.
And we're still great friends. I'm in touch with them often, and I've heard rumors that they might put another song or 2 of mine on their next project that they're hoping to work on.
Okay.
So that's really fun. And one of the songs I wrote with them is Women in Wine, which is the name of their entire tour right now.
Yeah.
And so it's really fun.
The name of the album too.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Kaylee Rutland is an artist who I got a cut on in the last couple of years. Strangely enough, I can't remember the artist's name now. This was several years back, but she was like the #1 selling artist in Austria, strangely. And I got a song on her record. So just kind of little things here and there. My friend Matt Ridenauer, amazingly talented guy. He's written songs with Johnny Lang and played on Julie Roberts records, and he makes his own records as well. He cut a Christmas song that I actually recut and just put on my Christmas project that I just released. So anyway, just little things here and there. It all start to add up.
It does. It all adds up, and it doesn't have to be major label artists cuts. You know, I think tons of us are putting stuff out either as independent artists, or we're writing and getting cuts on indie albums for artists, because it's a cut.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big deal, regardless if it's a major label or an independent label, or just someone who's not even signed to an indie label, just doing it independently yourself.
Yeah.
The fact that that you're putting out content that someone believes in and is willing to put it out and release it and sing it and perform it for people is a big deal. And that's just building a roster for you, so that if you do want to get signed to a publishing deal someday,
That's right.
maybe you can take this, you got a resume, you can say, okay, here's everything that I've done, and here's the success that they've had doing this. And, so you're showing the clout that you have,
That's right. And I mean, they're not hugely tremendous, but I get BMI checks every quarter.
Yeah.
And I get Sound Exchange checks every quarter as an artist. And so, some of it is because of like Muzak. Like those kinds of services, even just because I'm the performer,
right,
getting paid for that. And then the Shark Tank placement.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like something that I'm sure it's syndicated every now and again in the States, but where it's syndicated most is like Japan and like the weirdest, most faraway countries that I get a check and I see where it's from, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Shark Tank apparently was, replaying in Japan this month.
Oh yeah.
And, it does.
Yeah, and it
plays
plays on cable all the time too.
Yeah.
I think CNBC might play Shark Tank like multiple episodes every night, kind of a thing. I've seen.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So that kind of stuff happens, and so there's definitely, especially in the TV, film, sync world, when things are getting played, repeated over and over and over, then that's multiple amounts of income that you're going to make over time.
Yeah.
Now, just real quick, how did you meet the girls in Farewell Angelina initially, so that you ended up becoming part of the band? Because you guys had written together, I'm sure probably beforehand is how you guys knew each other, right?
Well, actually, I can't remember if I probably knew Nicole first. Okay. I met Nicole and Lisa within a year or two of each other, probably.
Nicole Witt and Lisa Torres.
That's right. Nicole Witt, Lisa Torres. So Nicole and I first met because one of the songs I cut on my Warner Brothers record that's locked in the vault is a song she had written called I Pray.
Okay.
And I did not co-write it with her.
Okay.
I met her because she was a writer that contributed to my record.
Gotcha.
And then after we met, we did start to write and become friends. And also, just funny little trivia is Nicole and my sister both have 2 daughters with the exact same names.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Like, they just... I mean, how strange is that?
How random, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so just kind of funny. So I guess I met Nicole first because she wrote the song I Pray for my Warner Brothers record. And then I remember I met Lisa after that because I know I was already off the label, and I was actually touring and singing background vocals for Randy Houser at the time. And so we had met around that time frame. And really didn't co-write or collaborate a lot other than just being kind of in the same social circles in the music business. Mm-hmm. And then we'd be on the same bills sometimes. Like we'd play at 12th and Porter all the time or the Basement. And we'd often find ourselves on the same show.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so, I've known these girls for, just almost forever, you know, for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And then Andrea Young, I really didn't know Andrea well before I joined the band.
Okay.
And then she and I became fast friends, and so and that's kind of how, just knowing Nicole and Lisa for a long, long time.
Well, I want to encourage people to go check out Farewell Angelina's new album.
Yeah, Women in Wine.
Because you co-wrote that song, and which is the title track.
Yeah.
And it's a great album and a great band. And so you were with them for a little while, and then
about almost 3 years.
Yeah, and then you left the group to go back out and do solo career.
Yeah.
And now you're out. So I know that Farewell was opening for the Bacon Brothers.
Yes.
On tour. So Kevin Bacon, who is the actor, for people who don't know necessarily, that Kevin Bacon and his brother have like an alt country, I would say like a kind of an alt country.
Yeah, kind of
Americana-ish
rock.
group, a band that's out touring heavily the past few years. And Farewell Angelina got to open for them for a while. And so I think you were part of that when that first started happening. And now, even out as a solo artist, you've been out opening for the Bacon Brothers recently, which has been awesome.
Yes, it has been. So I was a part of an organization here in town called Leadership Music. And every year you have to get nominated for it, and they want like a person from every facet of the music business. And so there's like 30 of us, I guess. And every year there's a different class. And so whoever's gotten nominated out of all these categories, entertainment law and publishing and publicity and artist and musician, all the things. And so I was the artist in 2014 that got chosen to be in Leadership Music. And it's just this cohort that we get together once a month and learn about each other's facets of the industry.
Oh, wow.
And it's partly to help, it's fantastic networking. It's also to kind of understand what other facets are doing and how it might impact your own, like live music day and touring day, and the way like Ticketmaster and Live Nation work. I mean, if you don't work in that part of the industry, you likely don't really know a lot about that.
Right.
So anyway, it's really interesting. And then, we do this big caucus at the end of every month where we kind of talk about the challenges and how do we make the music business even stronger and work together better kind of stuff. So when I was with Farewell Angelina, I got a call from Todd Coder, who was one of my classmates from my leadership music class. And he was a talent buyer for the Birmingham Theater and several other places in Alabama. And he's like, hey, I need an opener for the Bacon Brothers. Does your band want to come and open? Like, we need somebody quick. It's like next week. And so that's how we ended up getting the Bacon Brothers thing. And we just hit it off with them. Like, it was just, again, kind of opportunity and some talent meeting a lot of luck.
Yeah, and a relationship. Back to relationship.
That's right. It did. It went back to a relationship with
somebody
Todd.
You knew with this guy. Yeah, you have a relationship with this guy, and
That's
he's
right.
like, "Hey, I need somebody. You want to do it?"
That's right. And so, but they just took a shine to us, which we were lucky because that doesn't always happen. But they also, Kevin and Michael Bacon, happened to be. I mean, I wish headlining artists would take notes from them on how to treat their opening acts, because they are just so kind and generous and just wonderful.
Yeah.
And so we just struck up this great relationship with them. Andrea and I went to New York and actually wrote with Michael. And so it just kept a really nice relationship. And so they invited us back the next summer for a whole tour. And then when I released this new music this summer, they invited me out to support the single.
That's awesome.
It was really, really fun.
Wow. How cool. What a fun life.
Oh, I mean, that's the thing.
But you're doing that independently.
Oh, for sure. Like no label, no publishing.
Label, and you're opening
I'm paying for all of it. Yeah.
But you're doing it. You're living the dream.
That's right.
And you're doing it on your own terms.
Yeah.
And how cool is that?
I am having so much more fun, and I think I hope other people think this, but I at least think that I'm making the best music I've ever made.
Good.
Because you make different decisions depending on what your priorities are. And when I was in my 20s, it was all about being famous, frankly. Yep. For me now, I feel like it was the wrong thing. I wanted the wrong thing. I'm not necessarily saying that anybody who wants fame, that's the wrong thing. But for me, that doesn't feel right now. And I made different choices, and I made desperate choices sometimes, and I just, sadly, I look back and it really wasn't about the music. It was about, how do I get to the next rung of the ladder? And ultimately, and music was just kind of the vehicle for that. And I happened to have a certain amount of talent, and also the steps I was taking they were working to a certain degree. And then that just gets kind of intoxicating. And yeah, I wanted to tour, and yeah, I wanted to do some of the things we talked about earlier, some of the big dream things. But now ultimately, I just want to make great music. And I don't really want to be on the road, 200 dates out of the year. I want to be home with my family.
Yeah.
I don't, I want different things.
Sure.
And so I'm happier and I'm freer, and I think and I hope it's coming across in the music as well.
Yeah. I want to talk about that for a minute, about being married and having a family.
Yeah.
So a lot of the guests that I have on the show are guys that we talk about, what it's like when you're in the industry as a guy and you have a wife at home and maybe some kids, and how that relationship works and that dynamic works, especially if you're out on the road all the time. Like you have to make sure that all of that works out. I'm curious, being a woman in the industry and you're the one who's out touring and your husband is at home living here and you're out having to be gone different times. Like, what's the dynamic from your perspective being that, and how do you guys work that dynamic out together to say, hey, this is what I'm going to be out doing this and for however long at a time. And does that make sense?
Yeah.
How does that work for you?
So let me back up and say, when I was with Warner Brothers, I don't think I was married yet, but I was in a relationship, a very serious relationship, and I ended up marrying that person who ended up being my drummer at the time.
Okay.
And we're no longer married, but I think I say all that to say that part of that made it easier because whenever I had a full band gig, I mean, he was typically the person with me,
they were with you, yeah.
And so we were able to do relationship out on the road. Although that wasn't always the case because he really wanted to focus on a session career here. And so there was a time that I used a different drummer. But still, like, there was definitely like an understanding and we both understood the business, and oftentimes we would be together. And then, so we divorced. I'm remarried now, and my husband now is, he has a lot of flexibility with his job. He travels a lot for his job too. And so it's pretty awesome. Oftentimes he's kind of able to make his own hours and decide when he's traveling and where he's traveling to.
Okay.
And so, he's in the healthcare industry, but he's met me out on the road a ton. And actually, especially when we were with Farewell Angelina, when I was with Farewell Angelina, he would hawk our merch for us a ton. So he was our merch guy.
Yeah.
And he had a blast doing it too. And so again, we got to be together a lot. And we don't have kids yet, and so it made it flexible in that way. But then also I think because he does travel for work, and then I was traveling so much for work, again, there's a bit of an understanding. There's kind of just this like, well, yeah, this is like what we do. And frankly, there's kind of also, I find kind of an excitement and a freshness to the relationship when you aren't together every single day.
Sure.
And you come back, like there's definitely something to that,
Of course.
And so right now we're not really, structured with like, okay, this needs to get done at this point, and I'm only home these 2 days. And there was not really a need for that type of communication. And then over the summer when I toured with the Bacon Brothers and had some other dates, he was able to go with me a lot, and then he was my merch guy.
Yeah.
And so I've just been really fortunate in that way.
Okay.
And he also is just, he's just the kindest, most generous person, and is just really understanding. So
what would you tell somebody listening that is wanting to be out on the road, touring and doing that kind of thing as an artist, if they are married or if they're thinking about getting married and starting a family, but yet you want to be out doing this? Like, what are some pitfalls to avoid, or things to make sure that you work out, so that when you are out doing it, you're setting yourself up for success as a married couple, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I guess based on my experience, just a really good foundation of communication of what your dreams are and what you intend to do, so that that's clear up front. So the other person knows, like, hey, this is a really big part of who I am and what I want to do. And so the other person, can make the decision, do they want to be on board with us or not,
right.
Especially if you're not married yet.
Sure.
I'm sure that gets a little more difficult if you've been married and decide hey, I want to pursue this new dream, you
Right.
know, and that's,
Or
you
if
know.
you've been, or if you've been sort of pursuing it to some degree, and all of a sudden the big thing finally hits.
Yeah.
After you get married, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, oh yeah, now I got signed, and now I'm going to be out, and I'm out on the road with this huge tour or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you weren't expecting it. That was your dream, but no,
Right.
no real expectation. All of a sudden, now here it is.
Right now, here
you
it
know.
is, right? Yeah, I mean, gosh, I don't know that I'm the best person to ask, just since I haven't really lived that,
Yeah.
you know, any difficulties there, I suppose. But I guess I would also say, you know, it's important to keep the other person still top of mind and have some empathy and compassion, that even if they're not out there with you, or when they're not able to be out there with you, you know, you might be at this late night party after a show, and they're at home, you know, getting ready for their 6 a.m. wake up call to go to the office or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, to have consistent home-based check-ins, you know, and to still keep them top of mind and have good communication even when you're apart, you know, do the nightly phone calls, do the morning phone calls. I mean, just make them feel like they're still a priority in your life, because they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, and have a little bit of compassion that, you know, not every day is a big after party. That, first of all, that's for sure. It's not always glamorous, and you're also up at 6 a.m. or even 3 a.m. getting your start driving to the next city or whatever it is.
Sure.
But some of the things you do get to do in the music business are pretty darn cool sometimes, you know, too. And they may not be experiencing some of that coolness with you.
Yeah.
And so have some compassion.
Yeah. And I would also add at the same time, is like, okay, if you're the person who's getting to go to the after parties and hanging out with all these, you know, people doing this quote unquote fun, cool stuff, and then you've got a spouse at home that's putting the kids to bed or having to go to bed early so they can get up and go to work. It's like, as the person who's getting to go be a part of the party aspect of it, to be very careful. It's a dangerous position you can put yourself in, especially as a married person.
Yeah.
You know, because you're around people that are, you know, they're partying, you know, whether it's networking and things like that, there's still a lot of partying going on and that kind of stuff. And men need to be careful when they're around women that they're not married to, and your spouse isn't with you, and women need to be careful when they're around men. They're not, you know, it's a very dangerous position that you can put yourself in the industry. And a lot of marriages fail because of things like that. So just letting people know kind of the hurdles and the pitfalls to avoid.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, when you're in the industry. And
well, it's a I mean, I guess a lot of industries have, you know, conferences once a year, or, you know, that kind of thing, where maybe you're out on a weekend getaway at a hotel with your coworkers at a conference or something like that. But it's kind of like that all the time in the music business, especially if you're on the road.
Right.
It's like every weekend's a conference
Right,
out
sure.
of town, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, you have to have good boundaries. You have to have it is a little bit of a different beast, I think, than other industries, just because work hours there's no office hours.
Right.
I mean, you're kind of working potentially all the time, because even when it is after the show, it's like, well, but you want to make a good impression on the decision maker that came to see your show, and they want to go out to this restaurant afterwards, and they want you to come with, you know, or even a house concert situation. It's like, if someone's hosting you just in a house concert, they want to stay up and chat with you afterwards, and they expect you to stay in their home with them, and they expect to make you breakfast the next day and like chat more, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you're kind of, you kind of always have to be on, which can be exhausting. And B, it's hard to create boundaries, because like there's just always office hours, and sometimes those are really early or really late. And yeah, I mean, you just have to be really careful. And some people try to barter on a currency that you may not be into.
Sure. Okay, let's kind of shift for a second here, because you mentioned house concerts. So are you doing all of your own booking? Does somebody book for you?
No, right now I am.
Okay.
But to be clear, I'm also not really trying to be on the road a ton.
Okay.
So I'm doing very sporadic things that kind of sound fun.
Yeah. Well, as an independent artist, how do you go about doing your booking? Because you're your own booking agent.
Sure.
I'm my own booking agent.
Yeah.
I do booking for other artists as well. But how do you specifically go about the booking process? You know, how do you reach out to somebody, and how do you approach them, and then sort of build those relationships so that you can go play those shows?
Yeah. So Some venues I already have a relationship with because I've played there before, potentially.
Okay.
And I may have played there before because a headlining act asked me to be an opening act, and then I got the manager's or owner's card and just kept in touch. It could have been from when I was working with a booking agent and I've kept that relationship. Again, it may have come to me different ways, but I've already kind of got a relationship there. And so that's a bit more of a more casual email or touch. And then for places that I haven't played before, well, and again, when I was out with the Bacon Brothers, they have a tour lined up.
They're booking
so
it. You're riding their coattails
that's
as
right.
far as
That's right.
the tour itself goes.
Yes, that's right. So, that's nice.
It is very nice.
Frankly. For a new venue, typically I will sit down and develop just kind of a form email of what I want to say. And I'll usually include I'll make a Dropbox folder of assets that they might want to see, like a headshot and maybe a SoundCloud link to some music or a YouTube video, or just kind of get some of my resources together that I think is going to sell the package, and make sure to include a link to those things. Unfortunately, one of the most tedious parts is about booking on your own is so many different venues want you to submit and pitch to them a specific way. Some people want you to call between certain hours. Some people want you to email this and put this very specific subject line in the subject heading, and they want a link, or they don't want a link. They want attachments. And so a lot of the time is spent just looking up where you want to go, what's a good routing that so you're not driving 10 hours or all over the place between shows. And then once you actually find a venue that seems suitable to how many people you can draw or whatever it might be, then you got to read their website and figure out how do they actually want you to approach them. And it's extremely time consuming and tedious. It is not fun work, in my opinion. It's something I do not like to do. So I figure it out and I put together the assets and the email that I'm going to send, or however it is that they want me to reach out. And then usually I'm just carving out, a couple days, and just, that's what I'm doing. I'm booking, and that's my work for that day or 5 and just sending it out.
Are there times where you call a venue instead of emailing?
Typically I haven't.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay.
But also the tour that I did this summer was mostly Bacon Brothers and then some venues where I already had a relationship. So I haven't had to do that in quite a while as well. Something else I would like to mention on touring, if we have a minute, is and booking rather, is I've been with different types of booking agencies over my career at this point. Both from no booking agent, where I'm my own booking agent, to William Morris, and then a company, and there's several companies out there who their model's a bit different, where like a William Morris, if you're a baby act and you don't have a ton of leverage yet and a ton of success and track record, they're not necessarily able to always get you these amazing gigs. Like, your success begets more success, and they kind of depend upon that before they can really get you some major touring opportunities. So if you've written a hit song for Jake Owen, then all of a sudden now you have a relationship, and then they can help form that relationship into, well, why don't you tour with Jake Owen? Because now you have a record deal. This is totally hypothetical, but or as a single rises on the charts, well, then all of a sudden doors open up where people are more apt to look at you as an opening act, and then William Morris's job, for instance, is much easier. But until some of that stuff happens, at least in my experience, they were able to kind of get some really cool cachet type after parties and that kind of stuff, but it's much more centered in the Nashville bubble. It's not like big national exposure. And so there's some good things to that, and there's some bad things to that. Oftentimes you're kind of just, you sign to an agency that's big like that, and you think, oh my gosh, they're going to get me all these huge shows. And then you realize, well, no, that doesn't really happen until the whole machine starts working at the same time, And sometimes that can be disappointing. The other thing is they take a percentage off of whatever price they're able to get you, then they cut into that with their own percentage. Then I've also worked with booking agencies where they're not going to probably get you a lot of really cool cachet, like flashy, glamorous gigs, but they are able to get you consistent gigs in really small towns, more of a theater performing arts center approach, where you're not playing Chicago and New York and all these great places, but I mean, you're playing great places, but they're not like the flashy
big
things.
Yeah.
You're playing, small hometowns, and you're getting a guarantee. And then they're going to tack on a percentage on top of that for themselves. So they're not cutting into what you're making.
Right.
And they are going to string together and help you route this great string of dates for theaters, which, depending on your style of music, for me, being a singer-songwriter and doing more acoustic-based music, theaters and performing arts centers are like amazing for me, because they're dark, they're quiet, they're listening rooms ultimately, and that's the kind of venue I need. So if you're listening out there and that's the kind of music you need, that's a route to go. They're all over the place, really, if you just kind of look, and it's just a bit of a different model. You usually have to audition or showcase for a season of theaters, and then they'll help you do that and know where to go to do that. But it's just a different approach. And again, it kind of goes back to what your priority is. Do you want to be famous, and you want, like, you're not going to be able to sleep at night until you're like doing the flashy Garth Brooks stuff? Or do you want to make a living in the music business? And is making music enough? And is that really your goal? Because there is a way to do it and make a really nice living playing, venues that a lot of people haven't heard of before.
Yeah.
But they're going to be full, and you're going to get paid really well, and you're going to be able to play your music.
Right. How do you suggest getting in touch with a booking agent who does what you're talking about, that kind of does sort of the theaters and the smaller towns and helps string those things together? How do you approach a booking agent? How do you find a booking agent that's doing that particular get up that you're talking about? And then how would you suggest someone approach them to say, I'm an artist, this is the music that I do, this is the kind of venues I'm looking to play, I'm out, I'm willing to tour as much as possible, I want to sign with you guys.
Yeah. So a lot of the times the touring agencies that do this more performing arts center-y kind of thing, they have a lot of different departments. And so they'll also do like wedding bands and just different things. And so you may even start just like looking at, if you've been to a party recently or know of a wedding band or a cover band that's really popular in your town. Like, we have, My So-Called Band and Guilty Pleasure. There's a ton of like cover bands here in town. Chances are they might be with one of those agencies.
Okay.
And just like you might do with one of your favorite artists. I used to look at back of, when there were liner notes, like who produced it and who wrote it. And then you just try to get to those people.
Sure.
It's kind of the same way, maybe look on their website and see like who books them. Oftentimes there's an email address there, So I would say, and just Googling talent agencies and not turning your nose up at it when you see booking wedding bands. Like, reach out to them and say, hey, do you have other departments that book other types of artists? Because likely they might.
That's good.
So again, just because it doesn't look like the big flashy like thing that you kind of thought you'd like, that you thought you might want to do, it might be a little deceiving. So just do a little bit of detective work.
Yeah.
And then if you find out that they have a department that could work for you and your type of music, you also might be listening, and you might be a wedding band, and you might want to get more bookings that way. That's a great way to make money too. Yeah. So, there are a lot of ways to skin the cat. But at any rate, I would say either pick up the phone or email. And again, just have a nice, thought out. What I would do is have a nice thought out email that is just a template that I save, and I personalize it as much as I can to each person I'm reaching out to, and just making sure that you have a link or attachments to the assets you want them to see.
Okay.
And just highlighting, make it as enticing and yet as brief as possible, because people are busy, and so they don't want to read, a novel, even if you have a ton of credentials. Pick the top 3 and highlight those and move on so they can get on with their day.
Yeah.
And, a little link to the, a video or a song or whatever it is, letting them know that y'all might be a good fit to work together. And what would a next step be? A good next step, and don't be afraid to, I literally when I'm pitching for either a new venue or a new agent or a new whatever it is, I will literally write on my calendar when to follow up from them if I haven't heard from them.
Yeah.
And usually a month goes by, and if I've heard from them, I come to that date. I'm like, oh, I heard from that person. I'll just delete this off. But if not, I'll reach back out.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely don't want to do it more than once every 2 or 3 weeks, reaching out to somebody, especially if they haven't gotten back to you.
Yeah.
You know, because then that's just irritating to them.
Right.
And they'll just blow you off, and that's the end of it. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. What a great amount of information.
Oh,
You're just a wealth of knowledge, and you're a well just bubbling up of information and great advice. So.
Oh, well, I hope something maybe is helpful.
It's all helpful. And I'm grateful that you are willing to come in and sit down with me and talk to my audience and share all of this with us, because especially being an indie artist, like you've been on both sides of it. You've been a label artist, you're an indie artist, you've been in a band, you know, you've been a published writer, an independent writer, self-published writer. You know, you've kind of hit all of the main points, you know, as an artist and a songwriter and as a performer. So I think it's phenomenal that you've been able to do it, and you are the living embodiment of what it takes to do this, you know, in this industry and be successful and make a living at it, not being famous necessarily. You've had tastes of fame here and there, which is great, you know, but
I guess.
I mean,
it was back then, I guess.
Yeah, if that's what you're looking for, but that's not, you know, again, that's not necessarily the point of it.
Yeah.
You know, but you've been able to support, you know, yourself and help with you and your husband, and so you will continue to do great things and get more cuts and placements and touring, and you know, and I look forward to seeing what else you do. And I want the audience to go check you out. So your website, laurenlucas.com.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you got stuff on YouTube and.
Yep. If you go to the website, laurenlucas.com, you'll find all the links to all the socials, YouTube, where you can find my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, you know, all a merch store on my website. Yeah,
follow you
Facebook,
on Facebook,
Instagram. I do want to say one more thing, in that I hope it didn't sound like I was saying it has to be one or the other. It has to be either you're going for fame and maybe you'll reach it in this big shiny thing, or you have to just be okay with like playing music. Like it's not an either or scenario necessarily. Like sometimes making it about the music and making great music and making a living making your great music can lead to a different type of career.
Sure.
You can have both.
Yeah.
Just how you approach it is just different depending on your priorities.
Sure.
So I hope that was clear.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for being on the show. I'm very excited to know you, and I look forward to, we're going to sit down, we're going to write some music
I love
together.
it. Let's do it.
And
yeah.
We'll get something placed somewhere, and then I'll have you back on the show again, and we'll say, hey, look, this is what happens when you put the effort in and work together and build relationships. You can do this, and now we got a placement on something
That's right.
down the road here. So we'll see what happens. But
yep, we're going to make it rain.
That's awesome. Thank you for being on, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Well, thanks for asking me to be your guest.
You're welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us and taking time to listen to my conversation with Lauren Lucas today. I really hope you're able to take what we've talked about and apply it to your career and to your life as well. And remember, Edenbrook Productions is here to help if you need consultation services via phone call, Skype, or FaceTime. Let us know how we can help you begin to make a living in the music industry.